This is Dr. Sue Bolt, Head of Academic Development at the University of Liverpool, and you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Academy's Developing Practice podcast. In this episode, we chat with Sue about leading academic development in a dynamic higher education international setting. We hope you enjoy. Hi Sue, we're really pleased to be speaking with you today. But before we get started, could you please give us a little bit about your background and how you have arrived at the position that you found yourself in today?
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be with you and Alex today as well. So I've been Head of Academic Development in the Academy at the University of Liverpool since the Academy was launched in 2017. Prior to that, prior to the organisational change that led to the establishment of the Academy, I'd been working for the Centre for Lifelong Learning since January 2017. That's when I first arrived in the UK. So my background of arriving in this position involves transitioning from working in higher education in Australia to working in higher education in the UK. So in 2016, I was Acting Director for the Centre for Learning and Teaching and Manager Teaching Support at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia. Prior to that, I held an academic post as a professional learning consultant at Curtin University in Western Australia. In 2015, I had an Australian Government Endeavour Executive Fellowship, which was hosted by the Higher Education Academy. The aim of my fellowship was to make connections and share practice with higher education institutes in the UK. This was a fabulous opportunity for me because it gave me 3 months to travel around the UK, getting to know people and the diverse groups across the sector and share practice with them. When I returned to Australia after completing my Endeavour Fellowship, based on my prior strategic leadership in higher education, I was awarded a Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. My educational qualifications are uniquely suited to my current position. In my PhD, I investigated professional learning in dynamic environments by researching the relationship between professional learning and organisational change and development. One of my key findings was that informal learning was hugely important to professional development, yet managers rarely integrated it into their staff development plans. So I'm really glad that we offer a range of formal and informal opportunities for academic development in the Academy. Before I worked in higher education, I was a project manager for professional support and oversaw professional development for all teachers in the schooling sector in Western Australia. One of the key initiatives that I had responsibility for was making consistent judgments, which ensured that teachers could make reliable, consistent judgments about students' achievement of learning outcomes and standards in designated years. Other initiatives were the Quality Teacher Program, which was a government-funded action research initiative to enhance teaching and learning nationally across the education sector. So as well as teaching in the schooling and higher education sectors, my experience in educational development in the schooling and higher education sectors informs my understanding of academic practice.
So you've got a huge amount of experience there, Sue. So not only obviously from your time in Australia, but from the time in the UK as well. So I was just listening to that. I was just thinking, I bet you've got a good insight into the differences between UK and Australian higher education institutions. What would you say is the main difference?
Okay, so let's focus on academic development in higher education because that's my field. Mm-hmm. So in Australia, academic development was more organic than it is in the UK. So it wasn't necessary that people gained teaching qualifications or professional recognition, although in some institutions there was a whole of institution approach to that. In the institutions that I was in, there wasn't an accredited credit-bearing approach.
Right.
Whereas at the University of Liverpool and across many of the universities in the UK, the gaining of teaching qualifications and professional recognition is paramount.
Fantastic. And before we move on, Sue, I've got to ask you, we're recording at the end of November where it's lashing it down with rain outside, and I don't think we've seen the sunshine for months. How are you coping in terms of living in the UK when you've obviously spent so much time in Australia?
I'm frozen.
Absolutely. Well, no one can turn their heating on either.
I have my Ugg boots on and I've got a blanket wrapped around me and a jumper and a heater.
Fantastic. Okay, well, today you've kindly agreed to come and talk about leading academic development. So it'd be great if we just started to unpack that a little bit. As you know, I've moved over from a discipline and teaching education to academic development. And one of the things that's really struck me as I've made that transition is that academic development is incredibly dynamic and varies across institutions. So I wondered if we could just start by defining what is academic development. What are we actually talking about today?
So that's a good question, Alex, and a good insight on your part. So personally, for me, a fundamental aim of academic development is to enhance academic practice. And that sits both within my Australian organic background and in my UK accredited approach. But in my experience, and also according to Harlan and Staniforth, 2008, who were cited by Green and Little in 2018, there is no single definition of academic development. Its leaders nor its developers, who've been described as a family of strangers because of the different roles, backgrounds and strategies that make up the field. So there is no consistent usage of terminology used to describe the field, as academic and educational development are used interchangeably. At the University of Liverpool, we use academic development to refer to people development and educational development to refer to program development. At the University of Liverpool, senior academic developers in the academy support colleagues to develop their practice, leadership and scholarship. Educational developers and senior educational developers in the Centre for Innovation in Education support colleagues to enhance their programs. Even this categorisation does not fully describe the work of academic or educational development. For example, the Centre for Innovation in Education also supports technology-enhanced learning. When I was manager teaching support at Edith Cowan, my team consisted of senior academic developers, senior learning designers, and technologists. So it's not just the naming and the composition of teams that varies nationally and internationally, it's also where the function is situated and how the functions are allocated and what functions it's paired with. For example, at Liverpool, the Academy is allocated people development functions and situated in HR and paired with organisational development, equality and engagement, research staff development and the Prosper team. In other UK higher education institutions, academic or educational development could be situated with student experience, quality teams, the Faculty of Education, or a centre in its own right. And those who work in academic or educational development can be employed on professional services or academic contracts, which may or may not inform their work.
Yeah, that very much represents my observations from academic development and where it's located. It seems to me that the academic development teams aren't fully located within academic departments, but also they're not fully located within professional services departments either. So I'm just wondering how we then articulate that. Is it that they bridge the gap between the two, or do you think they're occupying a third space?
You make a good point, Alex, and academic development and academic developers could be seen as occupying a third space that bridges professional services and academia. In our roles, we have to deliver a service, but to be credible, we must understand and demonstrate similar attributes as academics.
Fantastic. And I'm just wondering what challenges that then presents.
So in some ways, inhabiting a third space is the best fit for academic development, but as it is an experiential rather than a contractual third space, it can also present challenges for the career development and progression of academic developers who have diverse roles on diverse contracts with differing expectations and opportunities for promotion. This can sometimes create quite a tension.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just reflecting on your career, which you kindly talked about at the beginning of the recording, I guess you've seen this modelled in lots of different ways across the various institutions that you've worked for. Is there one model, do you think, that potentially is more effective than the rest?
So thinking about models of academic development itself rather than models of contracts or anything like that. So in my experience, there's no one model that is more effective than the rest. It depends on the strategic objectives of the institutions, what they want to achieve, what resourcing they have, or what they can afford to allocate to it. So, for example, the academic development team in the academy is highly effective in achieving its goals and was recognised as finalists in the 2021 Global Academic Development Good Practice Awards for its integrated approach to developing teaching and scholarship. The high levels of connectivity between our participants and our programs promotes continuous professional development and enables career development, recognition and dissemination of contemporary and exemplary academic practice across and beyond the university. In a different situation, in 2014, I led the development and establishment of the Curtin Academy, which is a completely different model that was a separate to and complementary to the Curtin Learning and Teaching Centre, in which the Curtin Learning Institute that was responsible for academic development was situated. The strategic imperative of the establishment of the Curtin Academy was to recognise, reward, enable and extend excellence in teaching at the university nationally and internationally. It is an active and honorary network of leaders passionate about the collaboration and dissemination of teaching excellence at Curtin. When I was researching university academy models, I found there was a tension around delivering development, recognising and rewarding teaching excellence, and creating an environment that values teaching to the extent that it can sustain and grow a network that promotes teaching excellence with high levels of creativity and innovation institutionally, nationally and internationally. This brings me back to my earlier point about the institutional strategies that underpin academic development. A strategic priority that led to the establishment of the Curtin Academy was to recognise and draw on the expertise of educational leaders passionate about the collaboration and dissemination of teaching excellence at Curtin. This was completely different to, for example, one of Liverpool's strategic priorities, which underpins our support for those who teach to gain teaching qualifications and professional recognition. Another point I'd like to make here draws on my findings from my previous research investigating the experiences of participants engaged in action research in the Quality Teacher program. A key reason why initiatives failed was the departure of the leader. In establishing the Curtin Academy, which was a network rather than a work unit or a committee, we built in a sustainable leadership model with an elected incoming and outgoing chair, supported by an executive to guide the activities of the Academy Fellows. I could not be more thrilled to see how the Curtin Academy has continued to thrive and grow since I left in 2015.
Well, certainly, I bet that's a really good achievement for you to look back on. And I take it you're still in contact with those people in the Curtin Academy to see how they're getting on. Is that right?
I have been in contact with them from time to time.
Yeah. Good, good. So from what you're telling me then academic development is very fluid. And I'm guessing the leadership of an academic development team must probably take many forms. So could you identify for us what sort of skills does it take to lead an academic development team?
So the University of Liverpool's leadership commitment framework sets out the skills that characterise academic leadership, whether it be leadership of academic development or leadership of a school, a department, faculty, or leadership more broadly. The leadership commitment framework is underpinned by effective communication and networking, which are both foundational skills required to lead academic development. In the UK, I found that the Heads of Educational Development Group and Advanced AG's Leaders of Accredited Programs networks to be valuable. In Australia, I was actively involved in the Higher Education Research and Development Society of Australasia, or HERDSA. Engaging in such networks connects you with peers, helps you build relationships, and facilitates sharing relevant practice nationally and globally. So networking and communicating with colleagues and stakeholders at all levels builds contextual understanding of the sector and your institution and helps you to establish a reputation as a credible leader. Of course, it's not all talk. You have to establish a track record of success and be seen as a credible leader. But if you do not have the relevant contextual understanding, you will not be able to establish a vision and implement strategies in a meaningful way. The ability to collaborate with others is essential for leading academic development as an ambassadorial leader, to develop strategic partnerships within and beyond the university. The way that you, Alex, from academic development, and you, Matt, from organisational development, work together to create these podcasts is a prime example of collaboration. As an inclusive leader, you understand that it's not about the leader, it's about the followers, who, when it comes to academic development, may not perceive themselves as followers in the same way it might be contextualised in other settings. As a leader of academic development, and this goes for all academic development team, lead in different ways and areas, you must be able to empower others by working with them in a collegiate and supportive manner. So, Alex and Matt, you're both senior developers. How have you empowered others through your roles?
Oh, that's a challenging question. We don't get many challenging questions on the podcast, Sue, so thanks for that. I think from my point of view, being in organisational development, my role is all about empowering others. So, and what I do, I guess, is I pull various levers. So one of those levers might be formal development, but many times it's not actually that. It's just the power of the conversation. So you mentioned right at the beginning, Sue, about your PhD work and said that, there's an awful lot of informal learning that takes place in the workplace. And I remember looking at a report back in 2016 that said something like nearly 80% of workplace learning is done through peers. So sometimes as an organization developer, it's about being able to unlock those conversations and being able to maybe pair people up who are having similar conversations in other parts of the organization. So I guess I do it that way through my consultative approach. And I do that through a way of being the organizational ears, for want of a better phrase, I guess. So I listen to various people and I can normally sort of plug people into other people's work as a result.
Yeah, I think that's why, Matt, you and I work so much together, because we've both got this priority for professional dialogue. And that's something that I built my National Teaching Fellowship around. My golden thread was this concept of professional dialogue, providing safe spaces where equality of voice is prioritised to ensure authentic development. And Matt's coming at it from the OD, the organisational development lens, and I'm coming at it from the academic development lens. But for me, that's how I empower academics, is to provide these spaces, whether it's through the podcast or through the development series that Matt and I co-lead together, providing safe spaces for people to think through ideas and to chat through innovation so that they can then ultimately develop their own practice as well.
That's great. Thank you both for sharing your experiences there. And I'm sure that you're both very impactful leaders of organisational development and academic development. And to be an impactful leader, you must be able to solve problems and overcome challenges, and to successfully navigate quality assurance and accreditation processes, to lead change and deliver results. So in collaboration with the academic development team, I've led the transformation of academic development provision that has delivered results. Take our accredited programs, for example. The combined results of our highly effective Foundations of Learning and Teaching in Higher Education, Postgraduate Certificate Academic Practice, and the University of Liverpool's Teaching Recognition and Accreditation Framework show that the University of Liverpool has consistently had the highest percentage of academic staff with fellowship in comparison with the sector, the Russell Group, and Universities UK for 5 consecutive years. And we continue to deliver results with the growing number of enrolments on our Liverpool Online external-facing Postgraduate Certificate Academic Practice program, which is the only program of its kind to be accredited by Advance HE for a global market.
I also understand that you've recently written a book chapter in Leading Academic Development in HE, published by Springer, where you describe the need to adopt a transformational style of leadership whilst working at the University of Liverpool. So can you just tell us a little bit more about the impact that that's had?
Well, the book is still on the go, and there is a contract with Springer for it to be published in the new year. So not quite sure of the exact time in the new year, but the first half of the new year. And the title of the book is called Leadership Across the Lifespan.
Fantastic. And we'll link to that in the podcast reading list once it's out. Now, I've been lucky enough to be able to read that in advance of it being published. And I really enjoyed reading what you'd written there. I was really interested about what you wrote about the issues related to identity, influence, and power, particularly. And you wrote something that I actually wrote down because it really struck me and I wanted to reflect on it. You wrote, "Power means having the ability to act or produce an effect, to have control, authority, or influence over others. In academic development, power is shown through impact." And for me, I wrote that down because I just wanted to think about that, because that's something that we're really thinking about at the moment in terms of impact. Can you tell us a bit more about what you meant when you wrote that?
So firstly, it's important to realise that power and impact do not exist in isolation from identity and influence. So identity refers to the attitudes, beliefs, and values that distinguish a person or a group from others. So, for example, how do you identify as a leader? Are you a collaborative leader or a transactional leader? Do you value inclusivity and diversity, or is this not really who you are? Influence means having the power to affect change in relation to a person or thing without direct control. And we rarely have direct control in academic development. For example, to lead sustainable positive change in higher education initiatives, it is important to inspire followers who then engage in the initiative because they're intrinsically motivated to do so. Of course, a top-down, bottom-up approach works best. Academic developers who inhabit a third space can be effective change agents working with colleagues to create buy-in, inspiring them, motivating, and advocating on their behalf to address issues and manage change processes. Impact is evidenced, for example, by a shift, a change, a tipping point reached, whereby change becomes embedded in everyday practice. The facilitation of action learning sets is an effective way for academic developers to lead change. A positive outcome of action learning is that participants set the direction and own the changes which they embed in their practices. As inhabitants of a third space, academic developers who facilitate action learning have influence, but it may be difficult to measure their impact because it can be indirect. Alex, I know you've been involved in the Leading Learning at Liverpool. What insights can you share with us about evidencing the impact of your role leading change through this initiative?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is one of the networks that I lead, and I'm leading it in collaboration with one of the faculties at the university. And we've done some active learning sets to support colleagues to change some of their practices around educational leadership. And there's definitely, I've just written down what you've just said, change embedded in everyday practice. There's definitely changes that we've seen embedded within colleagues' practices. You know, we've seen colleagues who've set up new collaborations with different disciplines, for example, or they've enhanced their specific practices related to employability. So we can definitely see those changes in embedded practices. But I think for me, just as importantly, and probably for me a bit more exciting as well, is the change in people's mindset. And that's harder to measure in terms of impact, but definitely the qualitative feedback that we've had from these colleagues who've been part of this network is around the impact that it's had on their confidence, for example, as educational leaders, their leadership skills, their ability to make change and sustain change. And for me, that's just as important.
So, Sue, as you know better than others, really, we'd like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners can reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So if you could give us a few tips and thoughts to reflect on in relation to your practice, what would they be?
Thanks, Matt. I'm glad you gave me 3 or 4 opportunities for tips. So as we've discussed, academic development is somewhat fluid and situated in dynamic environments. So in such a complex higher education environment, keeping things simple can help make them doable. So at the beginning of the podcast, I suggested that the aim of academic development was to enhance academic practice. So if you're starting out in academic development and you're wondering how to go about it, to guide our practice and achieve this aim, we can ask 4 simple questions. Where are we? Where are we going? How will we get there? And how do we know we got there? So the first question, where are we, highlights the importance of understanding the situation and our relationship with others, because leadership emerges from the interactions of leaders, followers, and their situations. The second question, where are we going, is about envisaging where to go by being strategic, horizon scanning, making decisions to set direction based on evidence and intuition, and having the ability to communicate effectively and inspire followers. The third question, how will we get there, highlights the need for operational leadership and development strategies that transform vision into action. And the fourth question, how do we know we got there, reminds us of the need to evaluate our practices and collect evidence of our impact. Scholarship is essential for effective academic development and practice. So I think if you can just follow those 4 simple prompts, it will be able to help you to develop academic practice.
Right. Thanks for that, Sue. We will follow those 4 prompts and we won't go far wrong. Thanks for your time today. Well, I think Sue brought us some insight into what it's like to be an academic developer. In our discussion, Sue spoke about how academic development occupies a third space that bridges the gap between professional services and academics. Academic developers provide a service, but also need a clear understanding of the work of an academic. So this provides some challenges as well as many opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're right. I thought it was interesting the way Sue spoke about the power of our work, which is evidenced through our impact. She also made it clear that power only exists in the context of identity and influence. So we need to think about our identity as leaders of change and the influence we have to affect change. If you'd like to take your thinking further in terms of what we've discussed in this podcast, we've added some resources to the website on a specific podcast reading list, which you can access at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. And also, we love to hear what you thought about the episodes, so please do tweet us at Live Uni Academy, and you can also find us at eLearnerMatt or at Alexandra_Owen on Twitter.
And we're really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app, or even better, simply share the episode with friends and colleagues on your social media. Bye for now.